let's take a look at your final project drafts. I'm going to give you guys some feedback and critique, and then you guys can revise from there and submit for your final revisions. We'll start with Erika's here. I'm in preview mode, so I've hidden all the guides and extras and things. We'll scroll through really quickly, and then we'll go from there. All right. So I think so far, really strong start. There's a couple of little things like, this is a little bit pixelated. This is not on you. Neil here is a little bit pixelated. I think that's just because I don't have the linked images. When you guys package and export for your finals, I'll have all the images, so I'm not too worried about it. That's just a visual. Anyway, so the first thing, I took a look at this a little bit earlier. I'm going to redo some effects here that I did. First thing I would say is I would kind of get rid of your stroke on the frames here. I don't mind them so much on, that must be in your parent pages. I don't mind them so much on the overall page. I might get rid of them and see how you like how that looks. I kind of find it a little bit visually distracting. The only thing I was thinking, a couple of things actually, I was thinking graphically, if you do get rid of those, is maybe just as like kind of a, just kind of like a visual, if you wanted to keep the stroke on these and on your like on your graphics. I really like the strong corner graphics, by the way. I didn't forget to, I didn't mean to forget to mention that. I like the strong corner graphic there, strong corner graphic there, and then you cut out some of the guys there. It works really well. Um, anyway, I think for yours, it's going to be largely just on like little visual tweaks. Um, I might stylize this a little bit more. I kind of like where it is, but you might play around with like, breaking it across the whole thing. You might need to rearrange your text slightly. You do have some room to play around with it though. Um, and then kind of have, I like how you have the logo there as well. I might kind of have that, stretch across your whole, obviously you'd have to revamp that a little bit, but have this go across the whole thing maybe. Um, or even like 3/4 if you kind of want to give it a little bit of a different look. Try it, see if you like it. You may not. That's okay. But I think to sort of stylize these a little bit, if you wanted to, I might do, I'm going to do a copy and I'm going to do a paste in place. And then I'm going to arrange. I'm going to send that backward and I'm going to send it backward again. I'm just going to send it to the back. And then I might do like going back to our color assignment if you wanted to. Um, I might remove the stroke on the background one and then change your fill maybe to black. So you kind of have this like drop shadowy kind of thing going on instead of having that like the line around each individual frame, right? And then you could even almost do that if you wanted to. You could do that here if I can select it. There you go. You could do that there, kind of the same thing. I'm just going to do this on the one page. So I'm going to paste into place, send it to the back. And if you wanted to play around with either, having it come in a little bit, you'd have to obviously turn off, adjust your text wrapping a little bit. But I kind of think that the visual you have going works really well, and I feel like this is sort of like splitting the difference between um, having that line around everything and um, still having like sort of like a strong graphic to like have it kind of like pop out a little bit more, if that makes sense. And then you could potentially do again, like do the same thing with kind of all of these. But um, if you wanted to have an outline on these, maybe like thicker or kind of offset it like this. It might not need both. Like if you have one heavy outline on all of it. Um, I'm just not sure that it needs, the overall outline around the frame. You know what I mean? I think if you kind of applied more of a simple graphic there, I think it might still have like a strong visual. Um, I think one of the text-ish things is here. I know it's difficult with the band because they're so famous, yada yada. But it's Rolling Stone magazine, so just take off the S, no big deal. Um, I like where you have your navigation buttons, your dates work really well. Trying to think, I think your picture formatting works really well. I think the only like relatively like minor thing is kind of rearranging this block quote a little bit. Um, I might again like instead of doing this going all the way across, maybe have sort of a similar look to this. I think it's just kind of like a large block. Um, so if you kind of took a sort of that kind of like similar visual here, and even, again, you might have to adjust the text, but even kind of played around with it a little bit more. Again, removing that um, uh, outline, holy cow, removing that stroke and then doing the drop shadow here might help. What we might be able to even do is, oops, um, you can format this text a little bit um, so that it fits within like maybe not this small a space. Oh, I see you have this threaded, maybe. Yeah, you have that threaded. If you wanted to take this out of the threaded text, that's okay. If you wanted to have like a pull quote like that, that's totally fine. So that way this doesn't adjust like crazy. Like that. I'm gonna undo a whole bunch. Um, and then what that might do is free up, like I think it might be not awkward, but slightly awkward here where we have um, one frame here that goes across the two columns, but then the rest of it is all three columns, right? This way you can kind of keep everything three columns, and then you can kind of use this graphic, again, I'm moving this out of the way. Like you can kind of use this to sort of split that up a little bit, maybe not like directly in the middle, but if you wanted to have it, a little bit wider and a little bit shorter, and then kind of place this, you know, this is gonna sound silly, but somewhere interesting, and then you can have oops, and then you can have this, even if you made this a little bit smaller and put it on a couple lines, like you can reformat the text a bit, um, like get rid of this return and then have it be like, two lines, two lyric lines per line, if that makes sense. And again, just to sort of stylize it a little bit, and then again, kind of break this up and have that wrap around a little bit. Um, And I think it works well. Again, you have tons of room. You can see like the text kind of move down a little bit. And then if you do cut and paste this in a separate spot unthreaded, that'll sort of free up some space. Lastly, when you're done sort of formatting, not to say that you haven't done this, but when you're done formatting for your finals, and this kind of goes for everybody, just make sure like there's no awkward, um, they call them orphans and widows. Orphans are like one word or a couple words left by themselves, and then a widow is like starting a space, like if the they was just there by itself. It's a goofy term, but I think overall, like this page looks great. That wouldn't be considered an orphan just because it works really well. You can also get rid of the hyphenation if you don't like it. It's gonna mess with your text formatting a little bit. It's a personal preference. Some people like hyphenation, some people don't. I personally don't like it. I have a friend that's a great designer and they love hyphenating stuff, so it's whatever. It's all personal preference. Um, but yeah, I would just kind of like make sure you take a look once you're sort of done formatting everything, and then just make sure that like the we there, you can force a break. Um, and we can go over this in class too, but when um, it's kind of like inserting a special character, so you just kind of like insert your cursor there, and then under type, it's insert a break character. Oops. And then a column break will push that to the next line. So then that way it looks a little bit more, um, I don't know, optically even. But yeah, that would be, I would save that for the end. You might be able to get this line here on this page. You can play with your line spacing a little bit. It looks pretty good, but you might be able to bring that down even by half a point. Like you have 22, 22 and a half. 22 might, free up a little bit more space without it looking cluttered. But I think overall, this is a great design. I think some minor visual tweaks to really bring it home would work well. All right, we'll go to Naya. All right. Again, I'll scroll through here. And then I'll talk about it in a second, but all right, so we talked a little bit about this in class. I think that your headline works well, the logo works well there, your opening pages I think work really well. I like this graphic idea. We talked about this in class with pulling this graphic from their website, which is kind of cool. It kind of ties things together, and then grabbing the color from the logo is a nice touch. I think your page numbers work well, your navigation buttons work well. You have your link to the magazine. Again, pretty strong graphics. And then we did talk about this merch section, just to kind of not just fill space, but kind of like create this different look. I kind of allowed it to as part of the design. That was fine. So as far as graphically what to do potentially here, I think you could this might be like a personal thing, but I think you don't necessarily need the previous and the next labeling there because the arrows kind of indicate that already. So kind of like I feel like visually by default they might not be necessary. It just kind of cleans things up just a little bit. I might swap the locations of these. So you basically have, and again, if you don't like it, that's totally fair. But I might again sort of swap the locations of those and maybe give it a little bit more space, but have the arrows before the number, maybe. I don't know. Try it, see how you like it. Even if you kind of even these out, so oops, I right clicked there. So like visually they're kind of centered to each other. And then you can kind of, as I'm tweaking too much here, um, and then you can kind of have these as a group, and then place them in the same spot on either page. But that way, I don't know. I feel like it looks a little bit less cluttered to do it that way. You might not like that, which is fine. But I would definitely kind of center that, maybe give it a little bit of space between the two. But I would try it, see which one you like. Um, I would definitely say for this, maybe the first page, you could do this format. Again, I like this format. I like kind of how you have some of the images going over the graphic. It gives a little bit of visual movement. I think it works really well. Um, I think this block of text, maybe make this slightly bigger. If you wanted to, 14 might be, well, yeah, you could probably even get away with 16, give or take. And then maybe space that out. That might be a little too much. But anyway, maybe stylize this font a little bit, change the font to something a little bit, I don't know, like you have a cool font here. Definitely not this font because it's going to be hard to read in a block like this, but maybe even bold, italic, or just a sort of slightly different font to break this visually and leave this like this. And then I would say for your content pages, I would break these into columns. I would have those 3 columns, like 3 columns of text, and then again here, 3 columns of text. It kind of gets a little bit chunky and visually hard to read when it's like these large blocks of text like that. And if you had this in 3 columns, you could have the text wrap around the images, um, things like that. I think that would help sort of visually break up the text a bit so they're not these big chunky blocks of text. And especially here, you might have to revamp which text is white, obviously because you had to change the color for it to be over this, but those are all relatively minor. But I would go definitely once you start like really the article, I would break these up into 3 columns. Um, Yeah, and then lastly, not to like fill space, but lastly, maybe fill a little bit, and maybe if you can grab a couple other merch pictures or just different type of merch. I know they have, I'm biased, I know they have a ton, but I might also move these down just a little bit, just a bit, to still have that overlap there, and then you could bring your merch down slightly, and then maybe add a couple of extras again, not to just fill space, but like if you can, you don't want it cluttered, balance the line between cluttered and filling that space. But yeah, I think overall really well done. Again, just so, sort of those minor visual tweaks with the text, and then maybe your navigation stuff, I think would work really well. Nice work. All right, checking out Collins. All right, we talked about this in class a little bit. Um, so this is kind of not awkward for everybody, but the original design was he was kind of thinking of having these be individual pages, instead of having spreads. So we talked about if we wanted to keep this visual. I mean, this is kind of a rough going. I've previously given him feedback, so he's sort of redesigning this. So we were going to kind of keep this visual here, or even have, um, we talked about having this kind of visual with two columns and then some text, um, instead of, essentially having these be individual pages if you wanted to kind of carry this graphic um, across the spreads. Um, but yeah, he's coming up with some different ideas. I know it seems, I feel like I'm shortchanging you, but we talked in class about it, and we can certainly talk more in class about it. But this one definitely needs kind of a major overhaul. But again, it was just because you had like visually, oh, glitch there. Visually, you had this was the only, you were kind of handling it as page one, page two, page three, page four, et cetera, et cetera. And again, you got to watch your page numbers. We're starting at page 32, so just remember that. And then, leaving room for your navigation buttons and the info and all that. But yeah, that'll all come when I see your sort of next draft and revision. We can work on that for sure next class. I feel like that was a little bit shortchangey, but again, we talked about it in class. Uh, all right, so moving on. Here we go to Aidan's. All right, again, I'll scroll through. Oh, all right, sorry, I forgot this was one. So, immediate kind of, not concerns, but somewhat concerns with this. I don't know if we plan on adding more, but we need to have 6 pages, 3 spreads. So we have all of the information. You can see we have our dummy text here. This is that, what is it called? Lorem Ipsum. I like your headline. And then you have your um, info from the copy, which works well. But remember that we're going to be placing our article from that Word file. So that's where that's going to come in. I think that this layout, you could continue with this for sure. I think it's a little bit more sort of traditional and newspaper-ish, so it's going to depend on what you do with the rest of it. But as far as like overall design, I think it works pretty well. I might take this, and depending on where your uh, where the margins and things are. I might arrange this so it's a little bit more dynamic. And then also we're kind of cutting out one of the guys there. Where is he? He's in there somewhere. There he is. So we want to make sure that we're not losing anybody there. So you can kind of make that a little bit bigger if you're going to use this image. So you kind of fit them all in there. We don't want to lose any band members. But yeah, I mean, even, play around with some ideas of even having this go across a couple of columns. Maybe not, oops, wrong way. Maybe not 2 columns, that might be a little bit too big. As I'm moving things around, yeah, that might be a little bit too big. But even if you kind of had it go around, I'll hit the wrong button again. There we, oh, nope. Doing this wrong. There we go. I'm thinking like a column and a half, or even putting it on this side and then having the text wrap around this way. So you have like, image, image. Um, and then like this you can kind of get rid of because we have our we have the copy that you need from the article. Again, we can go over this in class, next class. You also have to keep in mind too, you need your information for the article. So you could even, move this up a little bit and have your, Rolling Stone page numbers, publication date, etc. Even if you wanted to move that up slightly, so you have your information down at the bottom. But I think overall it's a decent start. I think with obviously some more pages, and then once you start inputting more content, I think this could come together really well. Right, going to Emma's here. So we'll scroll through a bit. Right. And I think similar to earlier, I like the start that you have, the one larger image, I think works pretty well. Um, I think we need to make sure that we are not stretching our logos, things like that. So when we're resizing, we want to make sure that we're holding shift. A trick I've talked about over the semester, but a trick for resizing your frame and your image is if you hold down Command and then Shift, it'll resize your image and your frame. Not that you need to make this bigger or smaller, but I'm just saying. But you want to make sure that you're not stretching any logos or information. I might have this potentially go over, both pages even since you have this sort of like wide spread, right? Um, let's see if this will work. I don't know if this works with text or not. Oh, it does. Okay. So I'm going to hold Command and Shift, make that a little bit bigger. That might be a little big, but you get the idea. Um, but I might have this go across, both, and you can kind of center that a little bit depending on where that page break is going to be. But um, I might have that go across of the both of the pages. See if this will work for both. There we go. That might be a little bit big, but you kind of get the idea. You kind of split the difference there, even if you make this a little bit smaller. So I'm kind of going over and over and over. That might be a little bit too cluttered, but you get the idea. I might make that a little bit bigger to go across the full spread there. And then again, we want to make sure it's just Rolling Stone magazine. This is the band, not the magazine. Um, and we have our page numbers and our navigation buttons. We want to make sure that we have if you wanted to sort of keep this formatting, we want to make sure that we have the publication date as well, which can just be November, December, doesn't really matter for the project, but November or December 2024. But as far as actual, when we get into your content, I think for this um, body copy, for like the reading copy, I think this font doesn't work that well. I think it would be great for some of the quotes or some of the lyrics, so even like this, for some of the lyrics, I think it might work. And then maybe if you went to like a more sort of regular font for like the reading, you can see it's kind of a little bit hard to read. Um, and I think too, maybe breaking it up into 3 columns might help because it does seem a bit cluttered. Again, we want to make sure um, that we're not stretching photos. You can see we've kind of stretched poor Tim there. So we want to make sure that we're holding shift or using your scale tool uh, to resize so that we're not distorting. And then again, with the same information down at the bottom. But yeah, I think changing some of the text, formatting, and then again here, definitely like this is like definitely too blocky. And it almost has a different feel. Like, you have a pretty good feel with these 2 pages, and then you just kind of have this relatively plainish, um, big blocky final page. I think sort of revamping this to 3 columns for the full article basically. Um, and then I would kind of decide on if you want black or white, a black or white background. Um, Either one works. I feel like you just need to make it consistent. It almost feels like a different article here. Um, again, I think reformatting these 3 pages or these 2 pages rather will help that work. Maybe knocking down your body copy a little bit and then keeping your even if you wanted to make these a little bit bigger, these sort of they're not quite pull quotes, but these sort of like lyric quotes. Even if you wanted to make these a bunch bigger, and then again, sort of making these smaller and just using it sort of a more normal font. I'm just going to go to Arial just to do it. Um, again, so that way you have a more readable text versus, you know, this sort of more designed optical text. Um, I think might work a little bit better. Um, yeah, but again, I think overall a pretty good start. We want to make sure that we're threading our text so that way when we make our changes, so like if I were to make this smaller and um, these two text boxes are threaded, it would adjust the text within those threads. So we want to make sure that we're placing our text, not copying and pasting. Um, and I would always start, I said the article sort of starts here. I would always start on the left because we kind of read left to right, even though this is the bottom. I see why you did that. But oh yeah, so we are threaded a little bit there. We just want to make sure that our threads um, are correctly threading, if that makes sense. So yeah, I might swap these two. And again, when you make your article 3 columns, it's going to make a little bit more sense. But you can see as we're adjusting here, it's adjusting the article, but we want to make sure that they're threaded properly. But yeah, I would make those font changes. I think just tweaking this page a little bit, and then making those column changes and then the font changes. And I think double checking your threading and making sure. If you would like to see that, we can view extras and we can show text threads. I'm going to have to go back to regular mode here. Screen mode normal. So you can see this will show you how the text threads. So like this threads to here, this threads to here, and so far so good. And then that threads to that, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of see where things are threading. But yeah, I think going to a 3 column structure, I think will work much better. You can always revamp your threads too. We can get into that. But you can always revamp your threads as well. Um, to reorganize how things thread just by clicking this button and then it reloads. I'm going to escape, but you can see it reloads your text and allows you to rethread. But yeah, I think the major thing is kind of formatting the font, going to 3 columns, maybe doing something like this, maybe not this big, but maybe doing something like this so it's just a little bit more easily readable. But yeah, I think with those tweaks you could have a really strong piece. Right. Going on to Wilbur's. Again, we'll scroll through. I think overall you have a decent start. I like the 3 column structure. I think for yours overall, it's going to sort of be getting into a little bit more like designy, if that makes sense. Playing with some graphics. I don't mind your headline, maybe even having the headline go across the whole top and sort of stylizing it a little bit more. I would definitely encourage you not to copy your classmates, but I would definitely encourage you to look at some of your classmates, what they're doing, some of the feedback that I've given them to sort of maybe incorporate some graphics or again sort of stylize this a little bit more. You have the content there. You have a strong start with some visuals, but I might again play around with formatting of um, play around with formatting of images and text, just so it's not so plain. Um, don't be afraid to sort of break column structures, things like that. Have multiple, you don't need a ton, but you kind of did it here. But not have, again, here, like that's a decent start. But this are, breaks sort of that column structure in a good way. But we want to make sure that we have the whole article. Yeah, you still have some overset text, so you want to make sure that you're including the whole article. You guys want to take a look at the article, the word page, and just make sure that you do have all of the text in there. Um, even if I make that 18, you can see found the right church is the last line there. Just make sure that you're including the whole article. So you can go a little bit smaller with your text. But I think some graphic formatting, I think you have a strong start. I think you have a good idea. I think some graphic formatting here could really help bring this along. I'm trying to think of anything else there. Oh yeah, I was gonna suggest too, like looking at Rolling Stone magazine, like even online, looking at some back issues, looking at some of the the sort of look that they have, just so that um, isn't so stark. But yeah, I think overall you have a good shell and a good start. And I think with some formatting and some addition of some graphics or something like that, just to make it a little bit more visually interesting, would take this a long way. All right, next up, Ivry. All right, I think Ivory's the only one that did Richard Prince so far, which is totally fine. Um, again, let's scroll through a little bit. All right. Okay, just double checking. Okay, so we have some of these threaded. Okay, oh no, they are threaded. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. I'm just checking sort of the technical stuff. I think you have a great, really strong start to the article overall. I think this is a really good example of that balance between sort of like the classic, you have your three columns. I think that works well. Sort of classic magazine format, but also giving it a little bit of a visual interest. I think that if you had, like I'll undo, but I can't select that because oh, yes, I can. There we go. So like, again, like if you had this and just had sort of a more sort of standard headline, while it's not bad, I'm gonna undo. You can see how that adds a lot of visual interest, right? Just a small, you know, not that it's insignificant, but it might not seem like that big of a deal. But something as simple as like the strong colors, the strong graphics, I think work really well. What I might do honestly is I might make these both a little bit bigger, since it is your headline. And again, holding down Command and Shift allows you to resize your frame and um, and your content. That might be a little bit big. I might have overdone it there. But you kind of get the idea. You might need to sort of reformat a little bit, but you sort of get the general idea, maybe not going that big, but I like the look that you have there. I think it works really well. I potentially had thought of when I first looked at this, I had potentially thought of having you move this up. You could try it. I don't know. Maybe not, depending on how you like it. A little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. I honestly don't mind it down here. I think it adds some cool visual interest, or even if you wanted to kind of place it um, within this space. I kind of like that offset idea. But you kind of find that sweet spot between the sizing of your frames, the content of your frames, like the art thief in there. I like the font choice as well. Just sort of a little bit of tweaking there, and trial and error and see how you like it. But I think definitely making that a little bit bigger, maybe not that big, but definitely making that a little bit bigger than you had it, and then try a little bit of a different placement. But I think that's a super strong start for your intro page. Um, Again, just adding that little bit of visual interest to sort of work with the sort of more traditional format. Um, your navigation and info look great. Page numbers, etc. Your forward and back buttons. I like how you have the juxtaposed magazine and then the date here work really well. And then I think maybe without cluttering it, I really like what you've done here. Again, the three columns work really well, and then having this sort of middle column and sort of collage of images works really well. Again, even if this was a little bit more traditional, just three columns of text, you could kind of see how that's a little bit, could be a little bit visually boring. But since you broke it up like that, I think works really well. The end, I think works well. The only hitch here I feel like is these two. I might try to format your text a little bit, and you could even cheat and instead of 15, maybe do select all of your text and go like 14 and a half even. So this and this can be formatted the same, so it kind of ends. So it kind of ends there. This almost looks like a breakout quote, but it's kind of like an incomplete sentence. If that makes sense. So maybe kind of reformat your text so that this just ends here in the same style and format. Lastly, I was going to say, if you wanted to kind of carry this graphic through, one of my last ideas was, and this might be a little bit much, but I would try it. I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste. Okay, let's see what we did here. What I might do is I'm going to get rid of the text. Oops. Here. I'm going to get rid of the text there. And this is going to be a little bit kind of goofy to start with, but you'll get the general idea. Again, this might be a little bit much, but I might sort of block out as I'm trying to talk and think at the same time. It doesn't always work. I might kind of try to block out some of these headings. Obviously, that's a little bit rough, but just sort of an idea to sort of visually break up some of this a little bit, sort of stylize that slightly. So a lot. Oops, I did an Illustrator shortcut. I'm gonna undo really quick and group that. There we go. So now that's grouped. So yeah, I might use this to sort of block out. And again, it might be a little bit much, but just to kind of give it a little bit of visual interest. And I won't do it on every single page. And again, you'll kind of have to find that sweet spot to where these may or may not work. Even if you wanted to change the color and pull this green, so you had like green and orange instead of yellow and orange, but I don't know if I would do green text there, but just to, again, to kind of sort of break that up a little bit. And then I talked earlier, and somebody else's reformatting your text might help a little bit, but you have an orphan here. What you can do is, depending on after you reformat here, so these join, that might fix it. But if it doesn't, you could potentially throw in a line break here and force this to this line, so that way you don't have that little orphan hanging out there. But yeah, I think overall it's a super great start. I think some minor tweaks with some text. Maybe again, this might be a little bit much, but maybe just to sort of add a little bit of visual interest and carry this design through to help break up some of those sections, I think might work. Again, give it a try. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Fair enough. But yeah, I thought just to sort of add a little bit of visual interest, and again, just kind of reformatting the text a little bit just to make that, this go back with that. I think would work really well. But yeah, super strong start. I like it. Moving on to Joshua's. All right. So I'll scroll through. While we're scrolling, I think I had talked to you a little bit about you sort of have placeholders and space for your navigation, which would work. You have plenty of room to add these. All right, so again, I think a strong start. I think visually with the text and the images, I think you have a good balance of text and image. I would just double check. Okay, I don't think he was stretched, but I could have been wrong. I just wanted to sort of double check that he wasn't. Yeah, I think you have a good balance of visual and text. I think some tweaking graphically, I think would work really well. I might do, what I might do is I might replace, and this might be a little bit tricky, but I might replace this with one of their logos, just so that way you have their logo and then the 30-year history of a veteran rock band. Um, Again, you want to make sure that you have your page numbers in there and your magazine info and your navigation buttons. I don't know if you'd want to, but even adding and a copy and actually, you know what? Just kidding. I'm just going to make a frame just to add a little bit of visual interest. Um, I'm going to send this to the back. I won't do it for all of the images, but I might um, add, send it back. Add a drop shadow or um, think about graphics. Even think about colors if you wanted to go to like, some of the band's colors. I know that's just red, but if you wanted to go to like a maroon, I was thinking the rectangle just because you sort of have these rectangles here for some of these sort of pull quotes. Um, that's the only reason I was thinking sort of like adding a little drop shadow um, behind or drop graphic, whatever you want to call it, behind some of these images just to give it a little bit of visual interest. Um, I think your text reads pretty well. Not sure yet, 14, not a bad size for font. I keep getting these weird graphic glitches. Yeah, I think as far as sort of speaking of graphics, again, I like how you have kind of broken these up. I might stylize these a little bit more. Um, Even if you wanted to look at different, pull quote graphics, if you wanted to go with, even going with a round, round corners or play around with these corner buttons. I always forget what there we go. Um, you can do these corners or you can even come up with your own custom graphic. If you hold shift, you can do one corner. So you could even do a thing where you have, I'm doing it sort of half inch for both of these. If you wanted to do a corner, a regular corner and a rounded corner, I would definitely make this a little bit smaller. It's a little bit, oops, I need to turn it. It's a little bit cluttered. So I might even make those a little bit smaller and then make the text definitely smaller. Um, and even go with, don't be afraid to use a different font there. If you wanted to do, I'm just going to kind of pick a random font, but if you wanted to do something, I think it's great to have a more readable font for the body copy. Um, I'm not sure, I have a bazillion fonts, like every designer. I have a million fonts and I use like three. Um, again, something pretty readable. This is probably going to be silly. Yeah, that's terrible. Um, Something a little bit readable, but that gives it a little bit of visual interest. Um, you know, Something like that maybe. Obviously, this is a font that you may not have, but you get the idea. Um, Somewhat splitting the difference. 22, let's say. All right, not bad. And then 34 there. Even if we went, I feel like 24 is going to be, that's not too bad. Anyway, you get the general idea. You might need to reformat. I don't know what these were. Oh, that's the quotes, so it's not in that one. But anyway, you get the sort of general idea. Give it a little bit more visual interest. Format these a little bit so they're just not so blocky. Yeah, I think the addition of some graphics or formatting some of these pull quotes, I think could work really well. Again, I think you have a strong start. Adding the logo here. Even if you wanted to have the 30-year history of a veteran rock band on one line and have the logo offset there, oops, would work well. But I think just to sort of add a little bit of color, add a little bit of like graphic color, um, even if you wanted to include, some graphics down the side um, or on the top. And I can show you guys some samples as well in class, next class, but you kind of get the general idea. But you can kind of see the difference with having this be a little bit blocky. Not that it's bad, but having this be a little bit blocky and kind of clunky. This is a little bit more stylized, even though we're missing whatever that is. That's a little bit more stylized. It sort of gives you a little bit, like I said, a little bit of visual interest. You can probably even make this a little bit smaller and free up some space. Um, free up some space for the text formatting a little bit. But I think sort of balancing that graphic and the text, I think would help yours a lot. But I think again, overall, a really strong start. There's just some minor tweaks there and some adding some visual interest for you. All right, now Nathaniel, here we go. And I think this is going to be sort of very similar to Joshua's. I think you have a really great setup here. Um, I like how we have the formatting down here with the Rolling Stone and your page numbers and your dates. What I might suggest actually, well, let me scroll through first. We have nice big image. And then here, some two larger images, I think work pretty well. Yeah. So formatting here. So what I might do actually, and this might just be me, but if you wanted to, I don't think we need this rockumentary in there. It clutters the top just a little bit. But if you wanted to do something like, I don't know why I just thought of this, but if you wanted to do something like have Rolling Stone and the November kind of like that, I thought maybe it would add some interest there. Or if you wanted to sort of clean it up, um, you could have replacing that rockumentary, you could have Rolling Stone and you could have November, give or take. Obviously, you would want to align them, but have them there so you have this sort of line going across the top and then the line going across the bottom, and that sort of frees up your navigation sort of pain that you have going on. I think formatting your intro page, I think would work well. Maybe even making this. Let's see if I can do this without screwing everything up. Maybe even making this a little bit smaller, and then you can sort of force. You can kind of force this text a little bit, kind of like going back to um, our dog days assignment. If you wanted to throw in a text box and have it wrap to force that text to move again. But what I might do is actually, I might move these down a bit just for this page and then format this a little bit larger. I kind of like what you have going on here, but I think sort of maybe making that, obviously you'd have to change this a bit. Um, Maybe even getting rid of those two. Um, and again, I might go to using a logo there and then having the Pure Rock Fury. But basically making this more of like an intro. So if you have the logo up top and then the Pure Rock Fury and then your article starts. I think that this page works pretty well. I think your images might be slightly cluttered. If you wanted to have, I might move him down, down to here so that you have a little bit more, you know, spread between these images. And just again, so it's not just so cluttered image wise this way. Or even move this one up slightly just so that you have, and you can even tweak. So we have there, and then you'll have obviously move your dummy caption as I'm wrecking your vibe there. Yeah, and then I think overall this works pretty well. The sort of last thing I might do with some of these pages, with the line here, I like this graphic. If I can grab it, why can't I grab that graphic? Let's zoom in a bit. Again, I'm getting these graphic glitches. All right, I'm gonna select that. Okay, what I might do is I might actually, instead of having this go across the whole, oh, no, I don't want to move it like that. It's not gonna let me do this. There we go. I might move this in just a bit. Um, I don't know how many clicks I did, but you kind of get the general idea. Nope. Anyway, you kind of get the general idea maybe of what I'm trying to do here. Here we go. Um, and then instead taking this whole line here, and then that way, instead of going across the whole page, oops, too far out. It just goes across, maybe that's more than half, but inset that maybe like a third or so just to give it, so it's not so line heavy, if that kind of makes sense. It's just sort of like, again, not adds to the visual interest, but if you're going to have a line break, really make it break. Um, but yeah, I think, again, tweaking your intro page, I think would work very well. Again, I might suggest putting a logo in and then having your Pure Rock Theory and then playing around with some of your lines there. You might even, for your intro page, you might even take out these top two. Take out those top two and the sides, and then just continue those graphics for the rest of your pages. Sorry, my dogs are not cooperating here. And then I might switch one of these images, maybe to like a full band shot to one of these, or just a different shot. I like this live shot, maybe find like a studio shot or something of this one. But yeah, I think again, playing around with some of the formatting down at the bottom here, like this looks a little bit cluttered. Your top looks slightly cluttered. So I think kind of playing around with the formatting of these lines a little bit and freeing up some space. Again, even just moving this line up. Oops, that I missed as I missed it. Moving this line up away from that text a little bit would help a bunch. You also want to make sure that your graphics and things are within. I'm going to look at view, go back to normal. You want to make sure we have your grid there. You want to make sure that your, I think I moved this, but your Rolling Stone and your November are within the margin, essentially your safe space. So yeah, but I think some visual tweaking here. Let's go back to view, preview mode. Yeah, I think a little bit of visual tweaking, playing around with some of these graphics, I think would make this work very well. I think overall a really strong start, and I like what I see so far.